Welcome to the Once and Future Authors Podcast. I'm Stephanie, and I'm so delighted to be joined today by a new author, first-time writer of Freeing Rapunzel, Finding Peace After Trauma in a Divided Homeland. Please welcome our author, Anne-Christine Witzgall, of this super important book. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Stephanie, for having me.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you. And what a book. What a book it is. And I know you just launched recently, and it's your first book ever, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's my first book.
Okay. So what do you think about writing a book? Is so far so good, or anything shocking you about writing a book?
What's shocking me is how long it takes, or it took me, and what it takes to write this book, right? And to really to find the themes in it, and to make this, to align the themes in the book. That is, I think that is the most difficult part for me personally.
Absolutely. And speaking of the themes, it's such a vitally important book. Let's start with what made you start this book? What made you write it in the first place? And what are those themes?
Yeah, I think it was when my sister showed me my father's war medals. I was not aware of, so it was kind of came by a surprise, and it was fascinating for me to see these medals, and also to learn something about my father's past that was so strange to me. He sometimes talked about what happened in the war, but I never got the whole picture. Right. And my sister and me then that evening, and this is also part of the book, where she showed me what happened to him, and then I thought, well, I have to write this book. And plus the atmosphere at that time, the global atmosphere, because we had this new president here in the United States, and it was the atmosphere reminded me of our own past, and that's why I wanted to do something about it, because it very much affected me at that time.
Absolutely. Now, of course, I know which war you're talking about and all those other things. Would you mind just giving a little for our listeners here of what exactly war we're talking about? Because it means a lot, especially with what you were talking about from a political standpoint.
Yeah, it's the Second World War.
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about. My father was part of the Second World War. He was a troop doctor. And and then, but also he was also part of the Third Reich, or he was involved or he was a Nazi, I think, in the Third Reich. He followed Hitler in a way, never talked about it really, but I think the way we were educated, I grew up, and what he taught me, I think that he was kind of a follower.
Yeah. So basically you found these records, your sister, and it suddenly opened your eyes to the fact that your father was indeed a member of the Third Reich, and what that means. You know, probably you had no idea, but I'm guessing that some pieces of the puzzle now kind of made sense to you. There were things that you looked back and you said, oh, now I understand, right? Was there some of that going on?
Yes, there was something like that going on, why he was sometimes so erratic. His behavior was so erratic and kind of cold. And I think that's what he learned. And I mean, he was kind of, I would say, a victim of his own past, because his father died in the First World War. Okay. And he was 3 at that time, and his mother, my grandmother, never got over it, right? She was depressed until the end of her life. It was really sad to see, and that affected him. But he never talked about it, and I think he never worked on himself, worked on it, right? He never got it solved for himself. that's what affected me so much. And that's why it's about transgenerational trauma, my book, too, right? What we get from our ancestors, our parents, our ancestors, all kind of in our spine.
It is. But, first, I'm just going to dial back to that moment of shock, because I'm sure that many of us have that feeling that our parents or family, that we don't know every single detail of their lives, but this was quite the bomb that you discovered about your father. Some of us might find out that our dad was, not very good in school, or maybe even that he was arrested for petty theft, but you found out something that really is life-changing in that moment. And not only did you find out something that was life-changing, but just like you mentioned about transgenerational trauma, you found out that there was all of this trauma that nobody had mentioned. And I'm sure you yourself were saying, so that's why I am the way I am, or the way I think, and this is why I grew up and things were this way. Was it that kind of a feeling?
Yes, and especially what I did to my own children. My own children are so much affected by it, and it makes me always a little bit very sad to see that, and that I didn't know before.
Right.
And because then I would have done things different, and so this is also kind of a guilt in me,
of course,
that I had to overcome. And also,
but what a gift you are giving your children. All of us who are parents, I'm certainly look back and think, I wish I would have known then what I know now. I would do things a little bit differently, or a lot differently. I can't imagine that there's a parent in the world who doesn't think that. But you took this huge step of coming to terms with your own past, recording it in this book, really coming to an understanding of this transgenerational trauma and what that means in the future generations. What a gift. I mean, honestly, this book and all of the work that went into it, and I don't just mean writing work, I mean all of the inside work that you had to do to get here, because I'm sure you had to do a lot of work to get here to write this book. What a gift you're giving your children. I certainly hope, mom to mom, that the guilt that you might feel, you went over and above by doing all of this for them. So seriously, kudos to you. Most moms don't do that. You really went over and above. That's amazing.
But it's also about the collective trauma, right? Not only me, but there were so many others in my generation who had the same issue, right? Yes. And whose parents or grandparents, because my father, he was 50 when I was born, so he could have been my grandfather. Right. So that in Germany we didn't talk about this stuff. The people started to talk about what happened in the Third Reich in the 90s, right? Because there was a Holocaust, and we were not. And this was so awful, this what happened there, that we also didn't try, or we didn't dare to talk about it.
Right.
I think to have to honor this awful thing, this horrific thing that happened at that time.
But what a thing you're doing with this book. Just for our listeners, would you just speak a little bit about maybe defining terms here for transgenerational trauma and collective trauma, if you don't mind, just so we're all on the same page?
Yeah, so transgenerational trauma means that, so we have the body, the mind, and the emotions, right? And they should be in line. And when a trauma comes in, it's like a friction. It is a frozen part in us. And so that we cannot be in line with ourselves. And this is what transgenerational trauma means, that so we have our own history when we were born, but we were born, and what happens then when we grow up. But then when we were born, there's also a lot of trauma from our parents, or can be trauma from our parents, our ancestors, that also are frictions in our body or in us that that affects us.
Right, absolutely.
And we have to come to terms with these things, so that so that I have things in me like I'm scared. I don't know why I'm scared sometimes, right? So what is that? And looking at it and dealing with it. So
I'm so glad you defined that, because I'm sure so many people don't know what it's called, but they know that they feel it inside. And like you said about others who either are children and grandchildren of the Third Reich, or children and grandchildren of other instances around the world. People
you also have wars, right? You had the
Absolutely.
Korean War, you had the Vietnam War.
Yes.
That affects us, right?
And is it true also then that it's not necessarily a war?
No.
I would think that growing up in abject poverty, for example.
Yeah. Completely,
you might not have a war, but if you're growing up in that kind of poverty, or if you're growing up in an abusive household, that would also cause this kind of trauma.
Yes, that is true. Yeah.
Which again,
and the poverty comes from something, right? The poverty comes from something, and why is the poverty there all the time, right? What is that? Right. And to look at it and becoming aware of it, and then and the healing process. Or starting the healing process is also something that we all can learn from, because I think that then when everyone would deal with that, then the world would be a better place.
Wouldn't it though? Yes, it would. And then, like you said, it's not just war. It's not just, children and grandchildren from Germany. This is a worldwide problem that if we can begin to address it in ourselves and in our families, it would make the world a better place.
The colonialism, right? All this what many people are talking right now about, right? And also women who are always suppressed so long time.
Absolutely.
Suppressed by men.
That
is all affects us.
It does. You are so right. And what a gift. I said to you, what a gift this book is to your own children. But what a gift it is to the world, because it is about, quite honestly, while your book is about you, your book is about all of us.
Yes. Yeah. It's for, that's why I also wanted to write it, because I think that is something I hope that people can identify kind of with what I'm writing, and then becoming more aware of what's happening around them and inside them, right?
Oh, I thank you for that. Now, tell me a little bit about the writing itself. Writing a book, like you said, it's not easy in the first place, but yours was so personal, and you were dealing with a subject that not only is it incredibly personal, but it is also, distraughtful. It's just painful. Was it hard for you to remember things? Had you suppressed things? Tell me a little bit about that process for getting it out onto the page. I can't imagine what that must have felt like.
So that was, some things were so clear to me, like the chocolate egg thing. That was kind of a thing that stayed with me my entire life. So that was easy to write because it was so present, and also the dream at the beginning of the chapter that was very present, was this in me, kind of my entire life, and still is there. So it was kind of easy to write because it was so vivid, and to write about it was it was kind of what I experienced, right? And so that was the easy part. But then, as I said, to make an entire book out of it was different, because then I had to get to terms with what do I put in here, and what made me like I was then at the end of the book, right? What happened there? And so that's why I wrote a lot. I wrote so many things down, but then I stayed with what it is now.
Right. Yeah. At some point, I'm sure you had a lot more material, and you had to whittle it down and decide that it was only going to be this. How did you make that decision? What led you?
Yeah. I discussed it with people, and because I also wrote about how I arrived here in the United States, and what happened here to me. Because some people said, oh yeah, you have to share that too, because that is also kind of the story of an immigrant, right? But then, yeah, that was not, it is also dear to me what I wrote there, but my childhood was much more I was drawn to, and people then, some people said, okay, so they agreed, and that is why I stayed with it. That is where my heart was at the time when I wrote the book.
Right. I get that. Were there things that you thought about adding and you thought, that's maybe too much, too personal, too painful, and you decided against it?
Yeah, there were some stories that were not really what happened to me, but that happened to other people in my family. And this was kind of, I sometimes I thought about, I will write it, but then I thought, no, that is their part. I don't want to talk about it in this book, because I think it also was part of the trauma, the transgenerational trauma, but I let it out, and
I understand.
That was too personal for these people there. I cannot do.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. And I'm sure that other people who are writing a personal history like yourself come to those moments also and think, should I include this? This is not really my story. This is someone else's story. I don't really want to do that. That brings me to my next question about your family. Has your family read the book?
So my closest family are my sisters. My parents are they died, right? So I think that, they said that they ordered the book. They haven't read it before. So I was also not so keen on discussing it with them, because there are also frictions between my sisters and me, still are. And so I thought I didn't share so much with them.
Gotcha.
And they don't have, I changed their names. I don't have any pictures of them in there. Also, it's also about their privacy. But when people who know us read it, it's obvious who it is, right? Yeah.
But that brought me right into my next question about names, because I get this question so often about the names of people in a book. And people will say to me, should I change the names or should I leave them? And I think my inclination, and I guess I'm similar to you, is I always say, if you're not sure, then probably you should change them. Like if you're even thinking that this is probably a good idea, then maybe it's a good idea to change the names. Is that how you felt when you decided to have different names? Yes.
Yeah, different names. Yeah, and it you have a lot of freedom in writing, and that is the beauty of writing. You have so much freedom. But yes, I know we talked about this also in class, right? There are people who use the names, and then they got a lawsuit and all this stuff. Yeah, it gets really huge. I mean, how people react, and so that was something I thought, well, I use different name, and I think I changed all the names. I changed my children's names. I only my best friend Gabi, she is, because I asked her, can I use your name, and she said yes. It was okay. So, and my parents' names, I
Right.
them. Yeah.
Right. No, I love what you just said about freedom in writing. And I'm glad you said that while we're having this discussion about the names, because you changed the names, I think it probably gave you more freedom, because that weight was kind of lifted off in a sense. So I think that was a good decision for you. And that's why I said, so many people ask me that exact same question. And I'm so thrilled that we're talking about that exact question about the names.
Yeah.
Now, how about your own name? Because I have many authors who use a pen name. So did that ever come as a thought to you?
No, I think I'm a pretty honest person, and I can be direct. And this wouldn't be me, wouldn't have been me if I would have used a pen name. Right. Because I think that also opens discussions with other people. If I'm always hiding myself, kind of, then so for me, pen name is kind of hiding, going into hide. And I think this was not a question for me. I didn't want to use a pen name.
But I'm so glad of how thoughtful you were you thought about your own name and your own desire to be honest and transparent, and how that resonated with yourself going forward, and how you wish to present yourself to the world. But you also thought about it in relationship to other people's names, sisters, children, etc., and pictures of your desire for honesty for you. You knew that that's not the same thing motivating you with their names. And I so appreciate the way you looked thoughtfully at those things.
Yeah, I was really at the point where I thought, oh, well, I put a family picture in there, but I didn't. I just didn't want to confront. I think some people in my family, they are already, because I sent an email to them and telling them about the publication, and no one reacted.
Ooh.
That is also a sign, right? And
It is a sign, but it sounds like you were well prepared for that sign, which I'm so thrilled. Have your children read this book
yet? No, not yet, but I think they are pretty proud of.
I bet they're pretty proud of you. I hope that they are very proud of you, not just because, wow, mom wrote a book. And, as I always say, 90% of the population wants to write a book, but only this many actually do. So you deserve pride for that. But also because of the legacy that you are leaving, when you write a family history, and especially one that is so personal as this, and so introspective as this, it's really such a gift that you have given. And that is just an amazing thing. What are you hoping for our readers out there? I'm hoping that after they got to meet you right now, and they're already on the computer grabbing a copy, and that's what I'm hoping. What are you hoping as they read it comes of it next? What would be your desire?
Yeah, I would like them to see for themselves what effects they have in their life, what trauma, and because I think my story is universal, and to cope with it, becoming aware of it,
right?
And then this is also a chance to heal, and that is what our world needs, the healing.
Yes.
Of these traumas we have from our ancestors and parents.
Absolutely.
So that's what I hope, that it's a sign to set aside in this world.
It is. And that's my hope too, because I'm so thrilled that you wrote this and got it all down on paper. But I know I've learned so much hearing about the book and, reading the book myself, of course, but just hearing you speak and hearing what those themes are and recognizing that it's not just you and where you grew up, but it's us and all of the things that came previously in our lives. And that's just amazing for that to all be between the covers of a book for us to take a peek at. So just a reminder to all of our listeners about Anne-Christine Witzgall's new book, Freeing Rapunzel, Finding Peace After Trauma in a Divided Homeland, available at all online retailers near you. You will definitely want to grab a copy. There is so much to learn from a historical point of view, but also from a personal point of view, and so much is going to make you think about yourself and your own experiences. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It was a pleasure.